Call to order the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for January 23rd. Could I have a roll call, please?
Ballard.
Here.
Burrell.
Here.
Fernandez.
Here.
Kosenko.
Here.
Throckmorton.
Here. Let's start first with the attachment we had in our packet of minutes from December 19th, 2024. Do I have any corrections to add? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt the minutes the previous meeting.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Please call a vote.
Burrell.
Yes.
Fernandez.
You're going to abstain, I wasn't there.
Okay. Kosenko.
Yeah, you can vote yes still, or you can abstain. It's up to you.
Yes.
Throckmorton.
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes.
Being the first meeting of the year, it's that time again to do election of officers. I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, and she'll be asking for a slate.
Great. Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager. First, we would like to welcome our new member, waving from the dais. So thank you for joining us. As we discussed, Ms. Clapper's last meeting was at the end of last year. So the other thing that leaves us with is that she has been the president now for a number of years. So you all will vote tonight on the slate of president. For this board, we have a president and a vice president, and those are the officers. The president presides over the meeting, signs the findings forms for the petitions that have resolution at each hearing, and then if the president happens to be absent for some reason, the vice president can take over those roles. So typically, because Mr. Throckmorton was the vice president last year, he's presiding over this meeting thus far, so he will call for nominations for president, and anyone can nominate.
With that, do we have a nomination for the position of President of the Board of Zoning Appeals?
I'll nominate you yourself, Joe Throckmorton.
Do we have any other nominations? Or a second?
Second.
Do we want to go ahead and vote on the full slate then? Can I go ahead and
We
call?
can do either,
Okay.
yeah.
Can we have any nominations for Vice President?
Nominate Flavia Burrell.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other nominations for either position? So we have a nomination for President Joe Throckmorton for the president's position, and Flavia for vice president. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. With that, we'll take the vote.
Kosenko.
Yes.
Throckmorton.
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes.
Burrell.
Yes.
Fernandez.
Yes.
And that passes. Okay, moving forward then, before we get going here, reports, resolutions, or any communications for the board?
No, we do not have additional communications. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a list of petitions to be continued, and those will be continued to February 20th, 2025, and that's AA-17-22, Joe Kemp Construction, LLC, and Blackwell Construction, Inc. V-27-22, Cutters Kirkwood 123, LLC, and CU-33-24, /use 2024-11-0068, Hat Reynolds, LLC, and V-36-24 /VAR 2024-12-0053, Tariq Khan. Okay. And again, those will be continued until February 20th meeting. So we have petitions for those here in the public or those that are here to represent the petitioners. I just want to go very quickly. What we'll do is we'll have a report from the staff. After that, we will ask the petitioner or a representative of the petitioner to speak. You'll have up to 20 minutes to speak, and that 20 minutes will, whatever's not used initially can be used towards the end of the meeting. on your petition. We'll follow that with questions from the board, and anyone from the public who would like to comment, they will get 5 minutes each. And each person who speaks will be asked to swear in by giving their name. We'll swear them in, and then you can go ahead and present. With that, petition CU-31-24/USC, use 2024-09-0064, Tim Hankey is first on the slate. And Eric is going to present that, and he's online, correct? All right. And then I will state, too, that those that are online who want to comment later, make sure you raise your hand in the Zoom, and we will make sure that you're heard. With that, Eric, please, your report.
Thank you. So as mentioned, this is a request from Tim Hankey and Renaissance Rentals for a property at 915 and 927 East Miller Drive.
Okay, try again, Eric.
Okay, so this is a request from Tim Hankey and Renaissance Rentals for a property at 915 and 927 East Miller Drive. The petitioner is requesting conditional use approval to allow for the use dwelling, cottage development in the residential medium lot zoning district. So the property is zoned R2, residential medium lot. Adjacent properties to the west and east are also zoned the same and have been developed as single-family residences. To the north is zoned residential multifamily and is undeveloped. To the south is zoned high-density residential multifamily and has been developed with several apartment buildings. Just to the southwest, you have the City of Bloomington Utilities offices and associated buildings.
So we can see. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Eric.
It's all right. I'm sorry you're having difficulties there.
Thank you. Eric, if you would like, you can start again or pick up from there. I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Yeah, so real briefly, adjacent uses include single-family residences to the west and the east, vacant undeveloped land to the north, high-density multifamily apartments to the south, City of Bloomington Utilities buildings to the southwest. So the petition site is approximately 1.4 acres and consists of 2 parcels. Building permits have been issued to allow for a single-family residence on each lot. The petitioner has been slowly contemplating a different design for the property as they propose those 2 single-family residences and are coming forward with what is known as a cottage development that would incorporate the 2 buildings that are on the site now as part of a larger somewhat larger development plan for the site as a whole. So this petition would utilize an existing driveway that is on Miller Drive, and they would propose 2 new buildings. One building would be a duplex building, the other building would be a triplex building. Each of these buildings would have a garage on the back side with a driveway that wraps through the site that connects to the garage. They've shown an internal sidewalk system that connects the buildings through the site and to the sidewalk along Miller Drive. When the building permits were approved for the 2 single-family residences that I mentioned, sidewalk and tree plot were required along Miller Drive. So that aspect was required previously, but would still be required with this use as well. So there is also a buffer yard requirement for the cottage home development, which has been shown on the west and the east and the north side. So that would be reviewed specifically with the site plan approval, which would happen with a different approval that they would apply for at staff level. So what is being requested tonight is simply the conditional use approval to allow for this development, as well as just a basic review of the use-specific standards that govern a cottage home development. So this petition would involve the construction of these new residences on kind of the south half of the site. There is a large amount of property on the north half of the site that would remain undeveloped with this. There are no known environmental features on the site, no sinkholes or steep slopes or areas of tree preservation. The petitioner has shown some areas for possible stormwater detention. They'll work through those specific elements with the utilities department once they get approval for this and move forward through their various permitting processes. So they will have to be compliant with all of City of Bloomington Utilities stormwater management requirements as well. So with this request, the petitioner has submitted several renderings of the overall development. So on the foreground here, you can see the two buildings that the one on the left is currently under construction. The one on the right is already been constructed and is on the ground now. So in the foreground, you see, or in the background, you see the two new buildings that would be constructed. The petitioner has oriented the patios on all of these units to face and create a central open space, which is one of the requirements within the cottage home development, within the use-specific standards, is to create this common open space. So the buildings and patios have been arranged somewhat in a U-shaped to create that central open space. So again, these are just kind of stepping through the renderings. The buildings are fiber cement board siding with pitched roofs. All have been shown to be somewhat identical in terms of building materials, roof pitch and design, building colors. They all show in a patio or porch on the front of the buildings to create that central open space feeling that was desired and envisioned with the cottage home development, and have shown some landscaping on the interior as well. So with the conditional use requirements, there are several aspects that have to be evaluated for compliance. One of those is the general compliance criteria, and there are 4 elements that go along with that. One of those is compliance with the UDO in general. As I mentioned, there are use-specific standards that go along with the cottage home development that regulate aspects such as setback, density, parking area, separation between buildings on the site. And this meets all of those. As I mentioned, there is a central open space requirement as well, which the petitioner has created through the arrangement of the buildings and orientation of the patios and sidewalks. Parking and access are controlled and outlined as well. As I mentioned, there would be one drive cut, the current drive cut on Miller Drive, that would be utilized for the development as well. And again, as I mentioned, landscaping and buffering are required around the perimeter, which that area has been delineated on the plan as well. And then there's an architectural component that requires the buildings to meet all of the design standards applicable to single-family residences, which this meets through the allowed building materials and roof design and roofing materials as well. And then also with the depth ratio for each building of 1:3, which each of these buildings meets as well. So with conditional uses also is a requirement to evaluate that for compliance with the comprehensive plan. This is designated as a neighborhood residential land use within the comprehensive plan, and encourages a mix of housing types and building types within these areas. And also calls out that for areas that are on larger tracts of land, other building types such as bungalow courts, which is similar to cottage home development, and multifamily residences may be appropriate. So as I mentioned, this site is in keeping with that. It's 1.4 acres. This does front on Miller Drive, which is a collector street. So this development at this location would be appropriate, would not funnel any traffic through smaller neighborhoods or residential streets. And as I mentioned, there are a mix of housing types and land uses that are around this particular site as well. So we do feel that this particular development would be appropriate here. So certainly this is the first development that has come forward as a cottage home development. And incorporates a lot of the elements that were envisioned with this type of conditional use. And as I mentioned, this particular location is very appropriate in terms of the size of the property. The low number of units here will not have any adverse impact on adjacent properties. As I mentioned, there are no sensitive environmental features on the site that require any sort of protection. And there are no registered neighborhood associations adjacent to this or within 500 feet. So there was no neighborhood meeting since there were no registered neighborhoods adjacent to this. This would all be constructed in one phase. And so with that, we did make positive findings for all of the criteria that are required to be evaluated for this conditional use approval. And we are recommending approval with the 3 conditions that are listed in staff's report. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Before we move on, is this something that needs to be recycled from the start to get these to work?
Yeah, I just turned it off since he's done and to see if that'll do it. I don't know why it won't catch.
So as we wait for the monitors to be recycled, is the petitioner in attendance who would like to speak? If so, come forward and we'll get ready to move here in just a, oh, we're all out. We'll move along in just a minute. Go ahead and sign in. Okay. Are we back on? Check. Okay, thank you. All right, what I'll do is I'll ask you to say your name, and then I'll swear you in, and then you'll have up to 20 minutes. And I do want to stress that whatever time you don't use now, you'll have the opportunity to use that towards the end after we've gone through some questions. Okay, what's your name, please?
Yeah, thanks. Matt Ellenwood.
And do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Very good. And again, up to 20 minutes.
Thanks. Well, first, thanks, Eric, for the presentation. It was pretty thorough, so I'm not going to talk too much. First, just mention that Tim Henke, the owner, developer, is not able to attend tonight, so he apologizes. But I've been working with Tim and Katie Stein at Smith Design Group on the site for some time. Katie and Tim, I think, had been working on it for quite a while. As you probably know, this is a new allowed use within the zoning code. So it was new to pretty much everybody, us and planning staff. So it took us a while to kind of wrap our minds around, what this designation, this cottage development really meant, and then whether this site and what we could do with it would fit that. But what we have tonight is where we ended up. We spent a good deal of time on many iterations for the site layout. Went and met with Tim Clapp at Fire Department, and okay, this works or this doesn't work with fire access. Back to the drawing board a number of times. And then we finally met with Eric and David Hiddle, the planning director, and we kind of got, I think, on the same page and understood each other, what each wanted out of the design. So that's just as a little background. I think, like I said, Eric covered most everything, but a couple things of note maybe to add. Part of the reason why the layout is what you see, where you've got a main drive centrally that goes in and almost kind of stops and then turns. That drive, part of that drive is there now and accesses the existing structure, the existing house that's on the west or southeast side of the property. That's been there for a couple of years. That was built just as a single family use, really before the cottage development was in place in the zoning. So that's why it looks a little odd in terms of how you come in and then, kind of make a right turn to go around. And then the structure on the southwest corner across from the main drive, that's under construction now and was also permitted separately as a single family, standalone unit. So we already had these two single family structures in place, permitted and in the works. And then we developed this idea for the additional units, the triplex and duplex within the property. Initially, we wanted to just continue the drive straight in, access those those units with front-loaded garages, much like the structure that's there now. But because of the way the cottage development is written, it really wants the garages and drive to be at more the back of the units, and the units to face more central common area, green space. That seemed central to this idea of cottage development. Well, because we had the drive right kind of in the middle of the property, it was kind of like, now how do we turn this into what we want to get to? So, but we determined that we could go in 100 feet, and then that would provide the fire truck access. They can then, stretch hoses fire hoses as needed to the furthest structures, and that met the requirements for fire access, because otherwise we'd have to have like quite an extensive drive and hammerhead turnaround, further within the site, and that got to be a lot of pavement and just a challenge. And then the other factor, again, you don't have the site plan up, but there's quite a bit of grade change, as you can see, from about the middle of the property to the west, where the grade drops off. So we really wanted to keep the structures and drive as much as possible kind of on that eastern half of the property. So that's just as a little more background to how we got to the layout and the plan you have today. Hopefully the site plan and the renderings help you really understand how that will look and feel from the street, and we think it works and accomplishes what the language in the cottage development section of the UDO is speaking towards. I'll leave it with that and then answer any questions you might have. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we are to the board for any questions for the staff or the petitioner, and I would ask that only the person that's being asked the question should respond, please. Thank you.
Got a couple for the petitioner. First of all, I think this is a pretty outstanding use of 1.4 acres. This is great to see. It is new. You said 7 total units. What's the total occupancy that will be in the total units? If you got a duplex, a triplex, and then
For the whole site or just?
the whole site, yeah, all 7 units.
So the existing, I might have to pull up my plans. The existing single-family house that's there now, completed,
Yeah.
is 3-bedroom, I believe, pretty sure. And then the planned, the one that's under construction is 2, you're putting me on the spot, to pull up my plans here. I think that's also, it's at least 2-bedroom. And then the triplexes and duplexes are basically all the same units, and they're I think 2-bedroom. Eric, do you have I don't know if you have the floor plans? They're in the initial packets.
Yeah, all of the buildings that are proposed are 3 bedrooms each. And with the zoning, the maximum occupancy is 3 unrelated adults per unit.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are all 3-bedroom units. So that would be, 5 new 3-bedroom units. Thanks, Eric. There you go, thanks. Yeah,
Okay,
5 new 3-bedroom units
Okay.
between the duplex and triplex.
So with 3 occupants, so 21.
3 times 5.
Well,
15 plus the existing, yeah.
Right.
Right.
Okay,
That's
so
right.
21, okay. Do you know the intentions of the owner to rent?
Yeah, so
So-
I should have mentioned, so Tim Hankey and Renaissance Rentals, they've done a lot of development in the area. They also own Huntington Gardens across the street, which is more of a apartment kind of development. But they've also bought, developed, sold a number of properties over 25, 30 years in the area, some of which they've kept as rentals, some they've, fixed up, sold off. So they definitely, Tim has definitely put a lot of work into the overall neighborhood. His thinking in talking to him today was that these would be rentals, but it's not, unheard of that they couldn't be, sold off in the future, just depending on kind of market demand. And obviously the single family structures would probably be more, likely to be sold for sale. Yeah.
Okay. Can I do one more follow-up, Joe? Just one more follow-up. So in terms of how the parcel is set up, you could split out in selling the 2 single-family homes, sell the duplex, sell the triplex, all as 4 separate? Or is
Well,
that
so
something
if I
that
can interject real quick. So one of the use-specific standards for a cottage home actually says that they cannot be sold separately. So it might be possible to separate the 2 single-family residences into their own lots. But the duplexes and triplexes, unfortunately, by the use-specific standards that are in place now, could not be sold separately or parceled off.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Condoized, I guess, possibly, but not parceled off.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, you can take a seat for a moment, and we'll see if there's anyone from the public wanting to comment.
If you are on Zoom, you can send a message to the host or raise your virtual hand, which I think is in reactions.
Seeing no one from Chambers, though, would
No one on
anyone
Zoom.
online? Okay. Well, with that, if you have any additional comments from the petitioner, you can make those now. Otherwise, we'll go back to the board for action. Does the petitioner have anything further to add? Okay. Well, with that, we will go to the board for any action. Either comments, further questions, or I'll entertain a motion.
I have a comment.
Please.
I just have a quick comment. Tim has done a lot of great investments in our community. The products hold up. I just want you to extend my thanks to him for continuing to do that. Then my only other comment to Eric and the team, I thought that the staff report was really good. And it was so good, it kind of led me to my opinion. And this is more for David. And this is, to me, it just seems like another example of over-process. I mean, so in our zoning code, it says that there's a conditional use, that if you meet these conditions, the use is approved. And they've met all the conditions. So in the future, I hope we would just trust our staff and approve this at the staff level rather than creating additional process and delay, because they're going to have to go back to do a site plan anyway. It just seems like if we can ever, clean up the ordinance so that we can streamline this process to facilitate things that are actually approved in the zoning ordinance, I think it would be to the benefit of the community.
Is it my understanding that a conditional use has to come in front of the board, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the way it is now.
Yeah. So, like what Mr. Fernandez is describing would be that anything you wanted, in, like Mr. Grulich said, there's a number of use-specific standards. So if we're checking all of those, then and the use was permitted, then we could approve that. But yes, as long as it's conditional, we can't. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just to put an exclamation point on that. The authority of this body would not enable it to deny a petition if it meets all of those conditional use requirements. So it just seems like a really unnecessary step in the process, in my opinion, because you can't say no.
Well, so I'll just kind of say two things on that. There are two elements that we review with these things. One are the use-specific standards, but also the conditional use standards, which can be different. So somebody could meet all the use-specific standards, but it still might be determined that that use is just not appropriate at this location, even if you meet the specific things. So there sometimes can be an overlap of, two sets of standards that look at two different elements of a project. But we certainly hear what you're saying.
Any additional comments or questions? If not, we'll take a motion.
Make a motion to adopt the proposed findings and recommend approval of CU-31-24 with the 3 conditions listed.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, call the roll, please. A yes vote is for approval.
Fernandez.
Yes.
Kasenko.
Yes.
Throckmorton.
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes.
Burrell.
Yes.
And it passes. Congratulations. Thank you. Next on the agenda is V-35-24, Bloomington Fire Department. And I'm at the wrong page here. Who's presenting that? Eric? Okay. Eric, if we could, please, a staff report.
Thank you. So this is a request from the Bloomington Fire Department for a property at 3240 South Walnut Street. The petitioner is here tonight to request a variance from architectural standards to allow for the construction of a new police, fire, or rescue station in the mixed-use institutional zoning district. So this property is at 3240 South Walnut Street and is part of the Winston Thomas general property that is owned by the Utility Service Board. The Winston Thomas property has served a variety of uses over the years. It was previously a water treatment facility owned and operated by CBU. CBU has since moved all of those features away to a different location, and a lot of this property has just kind of sat empty. There have been several buildings that have been constructed on this property for the police and fire department over the years. Storage building for the police department, a training facility for the police and fire department have both been constructed on the north portion of the property where you see the black square. The Bloomington Animal Shelter also occupies a portion of this property on the south end of the site. And the City of Bloomington Utilities Department is pursuing plans to construct a new facility on the south end of the site, but that will be at a much later time. So what's coming forward tonight is a request from the fire department to construct a new building, as I mentioned, on the north portion of the property, adjacent to the existing police and fire buildings that would serve as an office building, as well as storage for equipment and vehicles, and a living facility, and is also envisioned at some point in the future to also serve as a dispatch station as well. So you can see here kind of a site photo showing the rough location of where the new building would be, back behind the pine trees. So there would be a new drive cut installed on Walnut Street to access the building. So the building would be approximately 18,000 square feet. And as I mentioned, the east portion of the building would have several offices, living facilities, training facilities. And then the west half of the building, or west 2/3 of the building really, would be a very large open bay storage building for vehicles, equipment, to serve as a decontamination area. And then they would also be constructing, in addition to the parking area that is just to the south of this, that adjoins the police building. There would be a driveway that would circle around the building, and then they've shown a road stub to the west to possibly allow for other future activities. However, the floodplain of Clear Creek does come up along the west side of this property, or I'm sorry, not along the west side of the property, but encroaches into this property and comes up just along the west side of where the disturbed area is. This petition does not involve any disturbance in the floodplain of Clear Creek. And there is a very significant distance that you can see here on the aerial from Clear Creek on the west side of the site to where this particular new building will be constructed. So the petitioner is here to request a variance from the architectural standards due to the challenges in terms of trying to design a building for the needs of the fire department, while at the same time using the design standards of the UDO to help guide the development of this building. So the east portion of the building, which you can see on the right side of the screen here, is the side facing Walnut Street. Because the uses within this building of the offices and training facilities work very well and are able to be utilized to meet the design standards, that particular portion of the building meets. However, the west 2/3 of the building that you can see on the left side of the screen, due to the design of the building and the very large open space within the interior of the building, create a lot of challenges with meeting the design requirements of the UDO. So you can see here the renderings, the elevation on the top part of the screen would be the side facing Walnut Street. So this would have the pedestrian entry. You can see the windows and the awnings. This portion of the building would have fiber cement board siding on the top and the bottom with the CMU base. And then on the bottom side of the screen, you can see the offices and the portion of the building on the right side that would be meeting. And then the left side, you can see the large bays and general open space of the building that would be serving as a storage portion for the fire trucks and all of their equipment. So you can see here again on the floor plan, the east side of the building with all the office spaces and meeting area. This would be the portion that would meet. However, the west side is not able to incorporate the design elements that are required by the UDO. So the Unified Development Ordinance requires modules along a building not to exceed 40 feet, in which each module has 3 out of 4 design elements. So those design elements include change in building height, recesses and projections along the facade, 50% glass, or presence of awnings. So due to the design of the building in terms of requirement to have the entire inside as one large open space, there are certain elements of the structural design that have to allow for some flexibility in the general structure itself. So that prevents typical materials like limestone or brick or fiber cement board from being utilized, because there's a certain amount of sway and movement that happens within a building of this size. So that creates challenges with meeting those design requirements, because this building is being used for a very specific purpose. As I mentioned, this property is zoned mixed-use institutional and was designed and envisioned to be developed with a mix of buildings to serve the government that don't always allow for certain design elements to be incorporated due to the unique nature of the uses that occur within there. The property is also unique as well in that it is very large. It's 63 acres. So the petitioner has designed the project and the building so that the portion of the building that faces the street meets our design requirements, but the back portion of the building, the west 2/3 of the building, is not able to. So the property is unique in the large size of it, and the portion of the building that doesn't meet does not face any public space, is not viewable from any adjacent properties. As I mentioned in the aerial, there is a significant several hundred feet between this building and any adjacent property to the west. There's a heavy tree row and riparian buffer along that area as well. So there's a lot of visual screening that occurs on the property as well to mitigate that. So there are certain variance requirements that have to be evaluated. First of those is that the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. The granting of this variance is not reducing any building safety standards. It is not giving any variances from building code requirements or fire code requirements. It is simply an aesthetic relief. The second criteria is that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Again, I pointed out the significant distance between this building and any adjacent properties. There's no visual impact or view shed of this building from adjacent properties that would be impacted. And then the third criteria is that the strict application of the terms of the Unified Development Ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property, and that the practical difficulties are peculiar to the property in question. So as I mentioned, the zoning of this property as mixed-use institutional envisioned a wide range of municipal buildings. Oftentimes those municipal buildings are not able to meet the design requirements due to what is occurring within those buildings. Buildings such as large storage buildings, water treatment plants, fire training stations, and large storage buildings such as this just create inherent challenges in meeting those design requirements. And so this property is certainly very unique, as I mentioned, in the very large size of it, the significant distance between this building and any adjacent properties, and the existing buffering and landscaping that is present that helps hide and mitigate any possible negative impacts by the variations or the variance from the architectural requirements. So with that, the department is recommending that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings and approve this variance with the 2 conditions that are listed in staff's report. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Do we have the petitioner or a representative here to present?
Yes, I'm here. I'm trying to turn on my camera, but
Okay.
We can't do cameras for the Zoom
Okay,
members.
just state your first and last name, please.
Yeah, no problem. Noah Donica.
And do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to Eric. You did a great job explaining this. To be totally fair, I don't have too much to say beyond the fact that the just to clarify what's happening in the apparatus bay portion of the building, I feel like it's worth understanding a little bit more about the process that the fire department is going to use in that. It is indeed a storage portion of the facility, but it also houses a lot of the logistics for maintaining and cleaning gear. City of Bloomington, I've always found great to work with their fire department because they show, best practice for fire safety. And one of the things that they've done is no dirty gear goes back to a fire station. And so this building really will serve as a main cleaning hub for that. Part of that is that it means that trucks will be decontaminated here, gear will be decontaminated here, and all sorts of other operations that I'm probably not even aware of that they do and store for their use. Part of that means that, one, we're storing a lot of vehicles in this building, a lot of service vehicles, a lot of vehicles that will be taken out of service and then put back into service. And so it necessitates this very large open apparatus bay. And so that's where we've come up with this structure. Very early iterations of this, obviously, with cost in mind, we wanted to keep this as low cost for the community as possible. However, we definitely understand why the eastern portion of this building really needs to be, lack of a better term, dressed up. And so I think we found a really great design. And if you have any questions about it, I'm glad to answer. I'm not sure if I can even cede my time, but the deputy chief is also sitting in, just so everybody's aware. And I'm sure Max can be here to help out if needed. So thank you.
Thank you, Noah. You have just under 18 minutes left, so there's plenty of time there. With that, any questions from the board for the petitioner or staff?
I have a question. Is the use of this building anywhere else in Bloomington today, like it's a transition to this, or is this brand new service that the fire department is providing?
That would probably be a question best answered by Deputy Chief Litwin.
Well, yeah, I can also answer. Sorry, I just got unmuted. But Max, if I say anything wrong, feel free to jump in. But there is this facility exists currently. Part of the reason for building this facility is that that building is currently leased and has recently been purchased. So there's a little bit of a time is of the essence because we're not sure when that building could or could not be sold. So this is part of a bigger plan for the department to one, again, grow the fire and life safety of this, because it will also have that operation as a station, not just as a logistics center, but also to house somewhere that is in jeopardy of potentially not having that property forever. This would be a
No, could we just have Max give his first and last name?
Max Litwin, Deputy Chief with Bloomington Fire Department. And Noah's correct.
Confirmed that the testimony you may give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
I just wanted to go ahead and swear you in now, just in case you wanted to jump in and participate. Did you have anything to add?
No problem. Noah's accurate. Essentially, the situation we were in with our current logistics facility is less than ideal for a number of reasons, but the largest one is just that we're in jeopardy of losing it at any moment, and the department would be in a predicament should that happen. So this alleviates that, and then in addition to that, it also provides some nice upgrades to a lot of things that the department has needed for a while. One of the main ones there Noah spoke to when he mentioned dirty gear, that's connected with carcinogens, which is a pretty significant health hazard for firefighting. And so the facilities here are going to let us mitigate that and, like you said, decontaminate and clean gear in a fashion that's much safer and more efficient than what we were having in our current facility. So Not only does it allow us to have a facility that we've needed for a while, it alleviates the fact that we're in jeopardy of not having one at all. And this corrects both of those.
Thank you. Any other questions for the staff or the petitioner? Okay, seeing none, we will go to the public for anyone wanting to comment. Anyone in the chamber here that would like to speak? If so, come forward, sign in. Seeing none, is there anyone online?
If you're on Zoom, you can send a message to the host or raise your virtual hand. I don't see anyone.
Okay. We will then return to the petitioner. If you have anything further you would like to say, either Max, Noah, you can do so now. We have just under 18 minutes if you'd like to make any additional comments.
I have none to add, but I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much. Max?
Same traffic from here. I appreciate everyone looking into this. Thank you, Noah, for speaking to it. And Eric, thank you for presenting it as detailed as you did.
Any further questions or comments? Now is the time, or I'll entertain a motion.
Adopt the proposed findings and approve V-35-24 with the 2 conditions as listed.
I have a motion and a second. Any additional comments or discussion?
I'd just like to thank the department for this. Looks like a great project and what we need, so thank you guys for everything you do for the community.
Anything further? If not, I'll take the roll. Yes vote would be approval of V-35-24.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Fernandez,
Yes.
Kasinko.
Yes.
And that variance is approved. Okay, and moving ahead, we're on to V-39-24, Monroe County Capital Improvement Board. And Jackie, the floor is yours for a staff report, please.
Thank you. All right, so we are looking at the site of the new convention center. So as you can see, located just at the south edge of downtown, on the south side of 3rd Street between College and Walnut, just east of the existing convention center. So the property is about 1.7 acres. The current zoning is mixed use downtown in the downtown core overlay, and the comprehensive plan designation is also downtown. The existing land uses are obviously surface parking lots, and then the building where the election center is when we are in voting season. The proposed land use is used from the UDO called Conference and Convention Center, and the petitioners have filed a site plan and gone preliminarily to Plan Commission with that site plan earlier this month, and will go back in February. So they are here tonight requesting a number of variances. They are can be grouped related to architectural requirements of the UDO, driveway requirements of the UDO, and street tree requirements for their particular zoning district. So I'm just going to go through them, and then we can talk about them if you have any questions. So the first group is the architectural requirements, and the first one we're looking at is building facade at the build-to range. So in the MDDC district, each one of your facades has to be within 0 to 5 feet of the property line. So on the north side, on the 3rd Street side, and on the College Avenue side, they meet that requirement. On the Walnut Street side, they do not, so they are requesting a variance. So you can see here, this is like a zoom in of the Walnut Street side. The darker blue is the edge of the building, and the lighter blue is the property line, and they're about 7 feet apart. So they are missing being able to meet that requirement by about 2 feet. And one of the reasons is because a number of things that are going on to the east of the property, including utilities and street tree requirements. And so they were unable to push the building east. The second architectural design we're looking at is for second-story windows. So in this and some of our other character overlays in the downtown, second-story window design requirements need to meet like historic double-hung window design. And so the way that that's described in the code is requirement of sills and lintels, as well as a ratio of 1 to 1.5. Let me let this guy in. So again, only looking at the second story, and you can see here, and you can see better probably in this picture, that the design for this building is window curtain walls on the public facade sides, and then broken up into modules by brick or in some cases cement, or I mean in some cases other stone to break the building into modules visually, and how they have addressed kind of mirroring what is required in the code related to windows while not actually using double hung is to have kind of that rectangular shape repeated throughout the curtain wall on both the first and second floors. So the third variance is related to building facade articulation. So you can see here, these are again, the facades circled in green that face the public streets, and they're largely flat. So the building that's being proposed is about 55,000 square feet. Again, a conference or convention center, and the main function of the building is a large 30,000 square foot, 2-story great hall in the center. So the design of the building is very much dictated by the use, and is not, a common use that we have in the downtown. And so because of that, some of our design standards for the building cannot be met. So in this case, you can see again for building facade articulation, on all three sides, they're straight. And what they have decided to do to try to mimic the facade articulation that is required in code, which is actually a maximum width of 20 to 65 feet for each module, with a depth offset of 5% of the total length, which would be quite an offset for this large building. What they've done is something I mentioned before, which is visually breaking up the modules using different materials, brick and other stone, so that it reads as multiple modules in areas along each frontage as opposed to one large wall. So the second grouping is related to driveway. They are not having any parking on the site. The only driveway access required for the site is here at the southwest corner, and it is for access to the rear of the building, which is like the back of the house delivery area. And because it's located, because that's the only one, driveway entrance that they need, and because it's located here at the south end of the building, they need to be able to accommodate the truck turning radiuses required for those deliveries with this one driveway. So the maximum width of the driveway allowed by code is 24 feet. The city engineer can allow up to 34 feet if you can show that you need that for truck delivery, but they are proposing just under 44 feet for their proposed width, and so they have submitted a truck turning movement exhibit, and engineering has worked with them to pare down this drive to make it as small as possible. And this is the probably best location on the site for this type of access, because they don't have direct access to an alley on the south side. And so the driveway has to come off of College. And we have added a condition of approval related to this particular variance that signage for the pedestrians would be located to the north and south of the driveway, letting any potential pedestrians know in case they don't realize that there could be large truck traffic here. And the last of the driveway variance, the second driveway variance is related to separation. So again, this is dictated by kind of the use and design of the building on this particular design lot that is unique because it has 3 frontages. And so the access has to go somewhere if they're going to have truck delivery. And so it's being located here at the southwest corner, but there's an existing driveway you can see here on the property to the south. So they are proposing a 10-foot separation, which is less than the 100 feet that's required by code. And the last couple variance requests are related to the street trees. So They are required, again, because the property is unique in that it has 3 frontages. They are required to put in quite a few street trees. Along South College Avenue, they're required to put in 12 large canopy trees. On 3rd, it is 10 large canopy trees, and on South Walnut, it is 9. So that is dictated by the length of their property. But this property is surrounded by a number of underground utilities. So they are trying to find locations to meet all of our location and size requirements, as well as our separation requirements from utilities. And one of our requirements is 10 feet from gas lines. So we're going to kind of zoom in on this little part here on the south. This red line on the right is the proposed gas line location. And so the petitioner worked with CenterPoint, and CenterPoint does not care for the separation to be met. So the petitioner is requesting a variance so that those trees can be within the 10 feet from the gas line. And then you can see the lines on the left side are water and sewer that are existing in that right of way. So trying to keep separation from those utilities, which is required as well, and being, CenterPoint being accommodating and saying they do not care whether or not the trees are close as long as they're not on top. And so the last variance request is for separation from curb. So code requires that the street trees are 5 feet from the edge of curb. Just a second. So again, street trees on all 3 sides, and that is for large canopy trees. So because of existing utility locations on all 3 sides, they have pushed the trees closer to the building. So this is a zoomed image of one of the typical trees on the College Avenue side. You can see that it's 17 feet, obviously not within not adjacent to the curb. Here we have on 3rd Street, again, you can see the gas and water lines that exist there and how they're trying to offset from those. And it's just about 14 and a half feet from the curb. And then this is on South Walnut. South Walnut is kind of unique because there are some utilities that are currently running through the middle of the site that will be relocated over to South Walnut and then up through the right-of-way. And I don't think that the actual location of those utilities has been determined, but I believe, and the petitioner can speak to that, I believe that those general utilities shown here, they believe they'll be in that area. And so they are trying to offset from that water line to the east. Which means because the water lines on all 3 sides are near the curb, it means they have to offset from the curb as well. So this package is for development standards variances. As you know, there are 3 criteria that have to be met, that the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. So we found that none of the requests would be injurious, and then the proposed findings are in the staff report. Again, for number 2, use and value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. We found that approving these variances would not affect use and value of the adjacent areas in a substantially adverse manner, and those findings are again detailed in the report. And for number 3, strict application of the terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulties, and that those difficulties are peculiar to the property in question. So those are articulated as well in the staff report. I do want to say that those are largely based on the fact that this is such a large development, such a large kind of conglomeration of properties. So because of that, they are on 3 major streets. And so the design requirements related to street trees, for example, don't necessarily match very well with the separation requirement. So what the petitioner has proposed is trying to be able to address the surroundings of the site and have the site be as in line with the UDO as possible. And then the particulars of the architectural design, I will say, are related to that this property is intended to function as a large civic structure that isn't necessarily considered in the overlay because large open space is needed for the center and of this building, and this use is required. some of the more traditional architectural standards are hard to meet. And this use is permitted, that some of the more historical architectural requirements are hard to meet, but the petitioner has done, we think, a good job of trying to meet those with some of the faux articulation. So the department recommended that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings and approve this variance package B 3924. There were 2 conditions in the staff report: that the variance approval is for the building and site design as submitted with the variance, except that any amendment to the site design or building shall not increase the degree of nonconformity allowed through this variance. So because this also has to go back to the Plan Commission for final approval, in case there are any architectural changes requested or required by the Plan Commission, we want to make sure that that's still possible, but that any of the nonconformities that are addressed through the variances cannot be increased. And then number 2 is that the petitioner will install the code compliant signage I mentioned earlier related to the driveway at the southwest corner. And then we added a third. The petitioner did not request a variance particularly for street tree totals, but because of the way that the separation works, and because of the utilities that we don't quite know where they're going yet, I wanted to address that in this report publicly so that that you all could approve, and we and members of the public would know that if the totals for street trees cannot be met, there is a section in the UDO called Alternatives Authorized that allows the department to allow for changes to a landscape plan. And so though they aren't requesting a variance for that, some of the variances they have requested kind of speak to maybe there not being a lot of room in the right of way. And so we wanted to include this condition so that it was clear in case the site plan does have to change slightly from what you see today. And I can answer any questions. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Is there anyone from the petitioner that's here to speak? Is it just one, or if there's a number of people, we can just swear everybody in at once if they think they're going to speak? So if you do, just go ahead and come forward and we'll go ahead and get you sworn in, and then that way we don't have to do it later. All right, state your first and last name.
Bill Riggert?
And do you affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and next?
Eddie Layton.
I'm sorry?
Eddie Layton.
And do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, so from this point forward, the two of you can respond to questions, but you do have at this point 20 minutes to present any information about this petition that you would like. Anything you don't use, you can be used later after some deliberation.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really don't have too much to add other than I probably should introduce who all's here on our team. I have John Weikart, who's the president of the CIB, and Sarah Hempstead with Schmidt Associates. And behind Sarah is Mary Krupinski with J.S. Held. They're the project manager for the CIB. And I believe Josh Nagel may be on virtual. He's with Weddle Brothers. They're the construction manager for the project. So if there are some other questions, we may ask them to answer. I think Jackie did a great job. I don't have too much to add other than to thank her for adding item 3. We're still waiting for CBU to give us a size of a water meter, so determine how big our meter pit has to be, which may impact a tree along College Avenue. So we need a little bit of flexibility to accommodate that. Other than that, we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. You'll have at least 19 minutes left if you choose to use that. Any questions from the board for staff or the petitioners? Please.
Jackie, this question might be for you on the, just a second. On the building facade articulation, is it a hardship to this project to have the facade articulates as the UDO requires?
Hold on just a sec. So the proposed finding that we included related to strict application we said that practical difficulty can be found in the use of the site as the design of the convention center is intended to function as a larger civic structure that is not necessarily considered in the overlay, which does require a large open interior space that is a peculiar condition and not conducive to articulation. So this is a hard one because the site is so big that it then allows a gigantic building. And so if the site was smaller, then this type of use couldn't go there. Because the site is so big, then it's one of a limited number of places we can use for a large building for this type of use that requires open space. And because the open space is required, then the articulation cannot be met and still function in the way that it needs to for the use.
So you're talking about the interior use of the space needs to be an open space, and that articulation might cause an issue for the use?
Right, because the site is so big and they're using it for such a large building, the 5% offset would be substantial because the frontages are so large that they wouldn't, if they were meeting, it wouldn't kind of meet any of the spirit of what we're trying to do, but it could, I think we are saying that because the site is so big and it can support such a big building, that because that building then requires such a large open space, the articulation just can't work there.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question, Petitioner. What's the time frame on this? I know we're coming back next month. We'll see you guys again, Planning Commission, but what's the timeline look like, just out of curiosity?
Right now, the goal is to have it bid and ready to start construction in June. And I believe, is it a two-year project?
Start to finish?
From June, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? And then please.
One more question, and it's the driveway width. So what was the number, the width that you end up?
Yes, we need 44 feet to accommodate semi-trailers. Andrew, or the city engineer, can give up to 35 feet, but we can't get a truck in and out off of College into that loading area with a narrower driveway. So we have to have the 44 feet, I think we came up with, to allow that. And we did prepare an exhibit using auto turn with a large semi-trailer that we.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
Yes,
yes.
thank you. No, I was just confused because some numbers were thrown. I didn't know which one
44, I think.
44.
Is that correct?
44.
Just short of 44?
Yes.
My question off of that is, so the expectation is the semis that come in there would come down the eastern lane, the left lane, and turn into that, or will they have to swing to come into that?
Let's see, I think that we've got it set up so they can stay in that.
And the eastern lane on the
yeah,
left?
And swing in and pull straight, like a right angle in and then back.
So that's what I'm looking at
Yeah.
here on
Yes.
this width and separation, but I do want to assure that we feel confident there won't be any of this swinging out by the drivers too.
Well,
No
with auto
need,
turn-
I should say no need for
yeah,
them to do
no
that.
need, right, because I can't comment on
Well, sure.
truck drivers' capabilities. So,
Okay. But we're providing them the resources they need in order not to create a hazard
yes,
by allowing that variance.
right, yes.
Thank you.
yes.
Any other questions?
I guess the other question then is what kind of provisions? I know you said signs for pedestrians to know. I mean, because this is a pretty large, somebody on foot walking through this open area. I mean, they need to know somebody's coming. Is there going to be some lights, something that will? Go ahead.
I believe we've been asked to add truck access signage. And it's also going to be designed so that the sidewalk is continuous. And they should be able to see, well, if you're walking north, you'll certainly be able to look into the loading dock and see a truck. And if they're pulling out, there's still the wide sidewalk that would allow someone, hopefully eye contact between the truck driver and any pedestrian that would be going down the sidewalk.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further? Okay, then with that, we're to the public for any comments. Anyone in chambers from the public who'd like to comment? Seeing none, anyone online, please raise your hand, and we will recognize you. I'm sorry?
No one on Zoom.
Okay, with that, we're back to the petitioner for any additional comments. You have up to 19 minutes if you have anything further you'd like to discuss with us. Okay, with that, we're back to the board for action. Questions, comments, discussion, or I'll entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion then to adopt the proposed findings and approve V-39-24/VAR 2024-12-0056 with the 3 conditions listed.
I have a motion and a second. Did you say 3 conditions?
Yes, we added that third one.
Oh, I'm
in
sorry,
the-
thank you.
yeah.
I just want to make sure. Thank you for that. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the roll, please.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Fernandez,
Yes.
Kasinko, Throckmorton.
Yes. The variance is passed. And just to be sure, we have no more action in front of the board. And we stand adjourned.